Hello everyone, welcome back. Here is Ali Talabi and we are going to wrap up module 4. So this is the third lesson from fourth module. So in this module we talk about financial statement analysis, and more specifically we talk about three different types of analysis. We talk about trend analysis, common size analysis, and also we wrap up with financial ratios analysis. Just a few notes before looking at some questions. So we introduced these three approaches. For sure, there are more than three, but remember, there is no best way of analyzing the performance of the company. So if you want to get a better picture of the performance, you should look at this as a one piece of the puzzle and then put all these pieces together to get a better picture of the company's performance. Now, we talk about different ratios, we talk about different approaches, but remember, when you are comparing two companies or when you are comparing the company with like industry average, make sure you are consistent in the method. What do I mean by that? For example, if it comes to, let's say, asset turnover, and for the asset turnover, you are using the total asset. If for a company you're using the total asset, you need to make sure for the other company also you're using the total asset. So you cannot use the beginning balance of the asset for one company and compare it with the ending balance of the another company. So be consistent the ratio you are using. So make sure, even if you are using some external sources, let's say, oh, I have the ROA here, or I have the, so let me calculate the ROA for this company and compare with the calculated ROA. Just make sure you look at the way that return on asset, ROA of that company is calculated, and they are using the same method as you are using. Otherwise, you are not comparing apple with apple. You're comparing apple with oranges. So be careful with that, because I've seen the past many times my students, they were referring to different ratios, actually the same ratios, but with a different type of calculation. So just be careful with that. It might happen for you as well. So when it comes to benchmarks, make sure you are using appropriate benchmark. For example, if you are analyzing company which is in IT industry, the benchmark you're using should be relevant. You can use the average industry of the IT companies, or you can use similar IT companies, but for sure you cannot compare an IT company with an auto manufacturing company. So just make sure you are using appropriate benchmark to compare your results with. Now, we talk about different approaches. When you're using the financial ratios or the common size, some of the results may look kind of contradictory. For example, say if the leverage is high, the return is not high, or the profit margin is low. That's totally fine. It doesn't mean all the ratios or all the different approaches should provide you the same results. That's the beauty of the analysis. You need to get a good picture of the whole company. So maybe in some areas the company is performing better. In some other areas the company is performing worse. So remember, you are not in the job of window dressing. You don't want just to provide a very beautiful image of the company. You want to be realistic, and that's why you need to consider both the risk factors and the positive factors and the positive return and the positive side of the company. So that's totally fine, and actually that's highly encouraged and recommended to look at different aspects. So don't be concerned if some factors or some actually ratios you are using, they are not providing very positive news about the performance of the company. That's a reality. Now let's look at the questions. So we are going to review some questions from this module. I'm going to provide you the answers to these questions. So let's start with the first question. The cost of goods sold for a company is $2,000. The current ratio equals 2, quick ratio equals 1, and the firm has $500 in current assets. What's the inventory turnover ratio for this company? So as you remember, the inventory turnover ratio was, so let me write it down. So the inventory turnover was cost of goods sold divided by inventory or average inventory. So cost of goods sold divided by average inventory. So what we have here, we have the cost of goods sold as $2,000. So this number is given, which is good. However, we don't have the average inventory. What we have here, we have the current ratio of the company. So what is the current ratio? The current ratio is 2, and the quick ratio is 1. So what was the current ratio? The current ratio was current assets divided by, so it was current assets divided by current liabilities. What was the quick ratio? The quick ratio was very similar to current assets. The major difference was we are taking out inventory from that. So it should be current assets minus inventory divided by current liabilities. In some textbook, actually they exclude the prepaid expenses. But the most common approach or version is just excluding inventories from your current assets. So the major difference here is actually taking out the inventory from the current assets. Anyway, and also we'll see the current assets given as $500. So if the current assets $500, what does it mean? It means that you can find the current liabilities from this calculation, from this ratio. The current liabilities will be $500 divided by 2, which is $250. So your current liability is $250. So the quick ratio is given. We just found the current liabilities. So from here, we can find current assets minus inventory. So your current assets minus inventory should be a quick ratio, which is 1, times current liabilities, which is $250. So this is $250. What is our goal here? Our goal here is to find the inventory. The current asset, it's already given, 500. So $500, that's your current assets, minus inventory, which we don't know what is that, equals to 250. So what is the inventory here? You're right. The inventory should also be 250. So because if you deduct 250 from $500, it should give you $250. Now you have all the variables you were looking for. The cost of goods sold is $2,000. The inventory is 250. Now let's just divide $2,000 by 250 to get the inventory turnover. What is that? You're right. It's 8. 8 times. So inventory turnover in this case should be 8 times. So the answer should be 8. Now let's look at the second question. For the vertical or common size analysis, we use as the reference accounts in the balance sheet and in the income statement. I mentioned in the vertical or common size analysis, we have a reference account or major account you are using to express or state other accounts based on that major account. So in the income statement, we use sales revenue, and in the balance sheet, we use total assets. So if you look at the options, you will see D is providing you with that answer. Total assets, it's used in the balance sheet, and sales revenue is used in the income statement. Now let's look at the third question. Question 3. If the current ratio for a firm equals to 1, which of the following options should be true? We learned that the current ratio is actually current assets divided by current liabilities. If this ratio equals to 1, what should be the conclusion here? If you rearrange the equation, you can see from here that it means your current assets and current liabilities are actually same. They are equal. And we know the net working capital is actually current assets minus current liabilities. So if they are equal, it means your net working capital should be 0. So that's the takeaway point. So when you look at the option, you see net working capital is 0, which is correct. Maybe you stop here and say, oh, A is correct, and that's the answer. Be careful. When it comes to multiple choice question, just make sure that you read all the options, all the given options. Because in some cases, maybe more than one option is correct. Now let's go on and look at the other options. B, quick ratio is less than 1. We talked about the quick ratio, and we learned that actually quick ratio is very similar to current ratio. The major difference is you are taking out the impact of inventory. So if you are taking out the number from numerator, it means your numerator is less than your denominator, which means the quick ratio should be less than current ratio. And we talk about this, and I mentioned that quick ratio is actually less than current ratio and is greater than cash ratio. So that's the cash ratio, quick ratio, current ratio. That's the order. So B is also correct. D, current assets are equal to current liabilities. We already talked about this, that those two items are same. And D is all the above. So based on this argument, we can conclude that D is the correct answer. Now let's look at the fourth question. Which of the following will allow you your firm to achieve its targeted ROA of 20% with a profit margin of 8%? When we talk about DuPont system or DuPont model, we mentioned that based on two-stage or two-phase DuPont model, the ROA is determined by two factors. One is the profit margin, and the second factor was asset turnover. So if you multiply the profit margin by asset turnover, you will be able to find the ROA. So your profit margin is 8%. What should be your asset turnover? Giving you the ROA of 20%. In other words, what number I need to multiply the 8% by to get 20% ROA? You're right, that's 2.5%. So if my asset turnover is 2.5, I can say my ROA will become 20%. And the rest are not accurate. They might be correct. They may not be correct depending on additional information which you need to get. So the answer should be B. Now let's look at the last question, question 5. Firm A has a total debt ratio of 0.4 and firm B has a total debt ratio of 0.6. Which one of the following statement is correct? So we talk about the debt ratio. That's one of the ratios, one of the common ratios we use to measure the level of leverage. And leverage, it means how much debt you have in your capital structure. And if you have higher debt, it means the company has a higher level of leverage. So in this case, since firm B has a higher total debt ratio, we can say firm B is more leveraged than firm A. So let's look at the options. Firm A is more leveraged than the firm B, which is not correct. We just argued the opposite case. Firm B can make higher return for its shareholders than the firm A. Now I'm going to refer to four-stage DuPont system. And one of the major ratios was the leverage or the leverage ratio. And I mentioned the leverage ratio impacts on ROE or return on equity of the company in a positive way, as long as you are making a return or you are making positive return. So here, just be careful with the wording, saying can make higher return, and which is correct, as long as the profit, there is a profit, or actually the company is making money, you can expect the ROE for a firm with a higher level leverage is more. So you can get higher, in other words, the potentiality of making money is higher in the company with the higher leverage. So B is correct. The return on equity for firm A is higher than the firm B. You cannot say is higher. Again, it depends on many other factors. For B, most probably is higher than A, as long as it's making higher profit. But to have a higher return on equity for A than B, you need to have more information. So you cannot say C is for sure correct. The 60% of the assets in firm A are financed by debt. Now be careful. For firm A, we said the debt ratio is 40% or 0.4, which means 40% of the assets are financed by debt, 60% are coming from equity. But here is telling us a different way, saying 60% of assets are coming from debt, which is not correct. 40% of assets in firm A are coming from debt, and the rest, which is 60%, is coming from shareholders' equity. Thank you very much. That's it for today. This is Ali Talibi. Have a wonderful day. Talk to you soon.